is a journey. It is filled with highs and lows, joy and sorrow. Along the way, we will face many obstacles that on our own we cannot overcome. So we need to travel well. We need to follow Christ so we don't stray from the path. His word has to be our compass, always pointing us in the right direction. Because without him, we are lost. In following his guidance, we have peace, and we experience his beauty and goodness. We find joy in his presence. And in following him, we will never be led astray. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight.
How many of you know that you're on the right path? How many believe that you're on the right path? How many hope that you're close to the path? Somewhere close to the path, right? This is the series, so I'm glad those of you who are here for the first time and those of you who are joining us in this first message of the series, I hope that you'll follow throughout this entire series. This series is, it's called The Path because I believe that's what we should be focusing on, even though we talk about focusing on where, our mindset usually is on whatever we're targeting to get to. Have you ever been on a trip and your mind is wherever you're going? If you're going to an amusement park, that's what you see. And you hardly remember anything about the journey on your way there. But we've all heard, information about the importance of keeping your eye on the goal, keeping your eye on the target, to inspire you to keep going through whatever gets in your way during the journey. And we've talked about that. I know I've even taught that. Sometimes that's the fuel you need because you're going to run into bumps in the road, you're going to run into detours, you're going to run into all kinds of things on the journey. And so you need that fuel to get through and get past some of those things that are blocking you. But what if you're on the wrong path? What if you're on the wrong path? And so today's title is, what's the end goal? What's the end goal? What's in it for me at the end? And as I'm going through this, where should my focus be as I'm going through this? Where should I intentionally aim my focus? And some people look to a whole lot of different things to figure out and really, let me back up, because to know what you're focusing on and what you should be focusing on has a lot to do with what your purpose is. And if you don't really know what your purpose is, you're kind of just going through the motions. And you may have a good job, you may have a nice family, but you still don't have that sense of accomplishment. You don't have that sense of contributing to, what am I contributing? Why am I here? We were each designed, God designed each one of us to contribute something. You have gifts on the inside of you. You have, abilities on the inside of you that other people need. And God put you in the earth so that you could provide that. And when you don't quite know your purpose, you start doing different things, and those things may not be contributing to your purpose, and all of a sudden you've spent 20 years doing something outside of what your real purpose was and not focusing on it. Some people do a whole lot of other different things other than focusing on their gifting. But I believe that every person on earth is on a journey. We're each on a journey. In other words, you're on some kind of path. You're either leaving somewhere, or you're just stuck somewhere, or you're headed somewhere. You're somewhere on the journey. And when I think about this, I start thinking about certain age groups and all of the different generations. And I'm going to focus on one here just to help bring your attention to what we're talking about. There are about 2.74 million babies born every week. Did you know that? It's a lot of people coming into this planet, right? Almost 3 million babies every week come into this planet. And these babies have been born. Every baby that's been born right now has been born into the generation that's called the Alpha generation. You know, we talked about the different generations, whether you in the Gen X, Gen Y, which are the millennials, or whether you in the Gen Z, the next age group. But the next age, this age group is the newest one, and it's the Alpha generation. It's babies that's been born since 2010, all the way up to next year. That's that group. Now, how many of you, anybody here in that group? All right. So we got an Alpha in the room. All right. How many of you have some children in this group? How many of you have some grandchildren in this group? And so we are all connected because we have someone that's very close to us in this group. And right now, the oldest Alpha is about, if next year is the end of it, the oldest Alpha is about 14 years old right now, and they'll be 15 next year. And so that's the kind of group that we're talking about. And so when we ask these kids, because my point is this, when we ask these kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do when you grow up? And many of them are like us. We didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Probably because of the way I grew up, and nobody, sat me down and gave me any options. But I want us to help focus on this. Instead of asking them what they wanted to do, I want them to ask them, especially when we do it based on, because what if your 10-year-old said, well, I want to be a garbage man? And we're like, what? I ain't raised you to be no garbage man. I ain't raised you to pick up somebody's garbage, right? And somebody's got to do it, right? Although I think that should be a transitional job, not a target career. But when we do that, we tend to cause them to focus on whatever they want to do based on how much money they can make. And I think there's a problem with that, because when I look at this, I said there are too many Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, all of us, and even baby boomers like myself, who still don't know who they are, what their gifts are, and what problems they're supposed to solve on this planet. God put you here. There's something on the inside of you to solve some problem that we all face. And so I want us to learn to love the journey instead of just focusing on the end goal. Learn to love the journey. And there's a reason we need to learn to do this, and there's a way that we can do this. What you'll discover in this series is this. You will discover that the answer is who you are becoming instead of what you want to be. Who am I becoming? What habits do I have now? What am I doing that's making me become something? Even if my goal is somewhere else, who am I becoming? So I have some questions for you. I have a series of questions. I always do. But here's the first one. Have you set goals for certain areas of your life, like, your marriage, your health goals, career goals, mental goals, like just improving your mindset, reading, that kind of stuff, personal goals, even spiritual goals as far as, have you set any goals since the pandemic as far as spiritually? How are you still going to grow spiritually since most people still don't come to church? We need to set some goals. If you're not going to come to church, you need to set some goals and figure out how to grow spiritually. And But anyway, how many of you, have you set any goals in any of these certain areas? Just wave your hand if you have any one of these areas. Just wave. Okay. And the next question that goes to this is, how do you know if your plans will help you accomplish your goals? In other words, you set goals, then you make plans to accomplish the goals. But how do you know if your plans are going to help you to accomplish those goals? That's a question you need to ask yourself. And how do you know if this is God's will for you? And then someone who don't believe in God might be saying, what's that got to do with anything? Even if you don't believe that God exists, I believe that you need to recognize that you are not God and that you don't control everything. And when you can't control things, you need to know how to respond to the things that you can't control. Otherwise, it'll drive you crazy. And if you don't know what God's will is for your life, because you can know, if you don't know what God's will is for your life, then you find yourself just doing things and not necessarily on a particular path to get to a certain destination. So, now that you thought about those questions, not necessarily answered them yet, but you thought about them, right? Here's the next question. Do you have those goals written down? So if you don't, you should write them down. One of the reasons you should write them down is because as you grow, you're really reinventing yourself as you go. You should be editing who you are. Just like you edit something you've done, it looks nice. Then a week later, you see, well, I can improve that. Then you erase a couple of things and change a couple of things. One of the reasons you need to write down goals is so that you can edit them as you improve, because you are not, by the time you accomplish what you set out to do, you're not the same person that you were when you set that goal. And so as you are growing, you need to learn how to update your own identity. Update it. Make sure that you're being updated as you move forward. Now, I have another question for you. And I've kind of stuck some things in here. So how do you know if you're on the right path for your career? And some people may think, well, it doesn't matter. I just need to do something to make some money so I can live. But how do you know if you're on the right path for your marriage? How do you know if you're on the right path for your family, your health? What are you doing to be on a good path for your health and your ministry? Just a plan for your life. You know, in scripture that I'm going to share today, James, who wrote this, he wrote this letter. When I look at the book of James, to me, it kind of reminds me of what today is like YouTube. James is a very practical book. He talks about how to do things very practically. So, I mean, if you want to find out how to do something, you could almost go on YouTube and look it up and figure out how to do it. And, you know, I've had many problems and things that I've done that I wouldn't have had any idea how to do. And I go on YouTube and look at it, find it, and see how somebody else did it and fix that bad boy. Anybody ever And so the book of James is kind of like today's YouTube. If you look at the book of James and you look at the issues that they had, you look at the problems that they had, and then you look at what he addressed in his letter, it's more of a how-to. It's a set of instructions. He put some helpful pointers in there, some colorful things, illustrations that he put in there. It's one of the most practical books in the entire New Testament. And so this is James exhorting us and exhorting the Jesus followers. You got to give you a little history here. When he's writing this, these are the first Christians since Jesus has been crucified and raised from the dead. But these are Jews that he's writing to. So these are Jewish Christians. These are Jewish Jesus followers. And that's, to even put that together is very conflicting, especially at this time, because the Jews didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And therefore, if you are a Jew, you were born a Jew, then you don't follow somebody else that's, even though Jesus was a Jew, they put him in an entirely different category. And so you have these Jewish followers who finally, these Jewish people who started following Jesus, then they started getting, the other Jews who didn't follow Jesus became their enemy. And so, to the point where if they control things, they control their income, so the people, if you look at the book, James is writing to a bunch of people who are poor, who've lost income, lost possessions, lost all kinds of things, and it's all because of them believing and following Jesus. Now, you and I, we don't have that issue today where we lose things because we follow Jesus. But the things that I want us to learn from what James is sharing is this, because it helps us in our everyday practical living, because we're almost just like these people. These people, this is the people he are addressing now, they've gone through that period where, they've been controlled by others, and now they're starting to settle down, go back to work. Think about this. A lot of the people we read about in the Bible, it seems like their only goal is just to live for Jesus. We don't read about what they do in the morning when they wake up, when they go to work, and what time they come home. All we read about is basically their spiritual life, a lot of what we read about. Well, these people, James is addressing a certain group of people. So let's take a look at what he said here. Excuse me. In the book of James, the 4th chapter, he said, "Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, we'll spend a year there, carry on business there, and make money." These Jews that James is addressing here, they were living outside of Palestine at this time, and this letter was circulated among, from church to church. No specific geographical place is where he's talking about, but he's talking to these people, and as I said, most of them have been suffering because they have been oppressed by some of the other Jews who were not Jesus followers. And he said, "Now listen, you who say." Now, so everybody, he's not talking to everybody, but he's talking about a certain group of people. You who say this. He's writing specifically to basically business people here. He said, "You who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money." He's writing specifically to people who are generating income, who are making and it's very typical. They're making plans. That's why I ask you, do you set goals? Do you have plans? He's talking about these people who are setting plans. They have written goals. They're looking at what they're doing. They're deciding what they're going to do. He said, "Listen, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city and spend a year there and carry on business and make money." Where they're saying, we're going to go, stay there for a year. It's almost just like we do when we decide to go somewhere and make money. But think about this. A lot of people do this. A lot of businesses do this. Some business, they go to a city. They don't plan to actually help a community to do anything. They just go to get what they can get, and then they may shut down and move on. You've heard of businesses that do that kind of stuff. But the key here is that they are just projecting their profits, because the next thing they're saying is, we'll just move on to the next city. We'll just move on to the next city and do the same thing. And so the problem is this. The problem is the merchants that he's talking to, what they would determine, they're determining their future with their plans of only considering financial profits. They're not thinking about anything else. They're not thinking about the community that they're in. They're just thinking about making money. And you almost can't blame them, because they've been oppressed. They haven't made money for a while. And so now they're getting to make some money. And a couple of years ago, they were all praying and believing God and finally making it through, God helping them make it through whatever they were going through. Now that things are starting to settle down, kind of like us, where the economy kind of coming back up. You got a job, you're making some money, but these kind of businesses are not necessarily focusing on the community, putting back in the community, giving back to the community, doing things to even hire people from the community, those kind of things. So that's the mindset that these people had. And James is going on to say to them, he said, why you don't even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. What he's bringing to their attention is separate from God's purpose for you, you're almost like a little blip on a screen. Think about this. Even when he says you are a mist, one translation, I believe it's the King James Version, says you are like vapor. You're like a puff of smoke. And so how many of you seen a puff of smoke and then in a minute it's gone? And that's what he's saying. Without God's purpose in your life, you are just like a vapor. You're just like a smoke. I think about how insignificant we could be without the purpose of God on this planet. Think about you living, you who are here in the sanctuary. We live in Flint, right? Somewhere close around Flint or our community. And then if you zoom out a little bit, then we got Genesee County. Zoom out a little bit more, and you got, the whole state of Michigan. And how significant are you in the state of Michigan? Then you zoom out more, you got the entire United States. Zoom out a little bit more, you got the whole globe, all the other countries. Many of us have never been to another country, but if you go, it would expand your world. But just think about how significant or insignificant you could be being a part of something zooming way down. Then you back all the way out from every country on the globe, and you realize that Earth is just one of the planets in our galaxy. And then you think about we happen to be in one galaxy, which happens to be the second largest galaxy of all the galaxies. Do you know how many galaxies that they estimate that there are? 2 trillion. And we wonder how awesome God is and how this could even be without some intelligent being putting all this together. And what James is saying to them, you're making plans as if you control all of this and you can make what happen for yourself all by yourself. And so what he's saying is this: you need to create a habit of looking to the Creator. You need to create a habit of looking to God, who truly does have control of all of this. You need to create a habit of including Him in your plans. Keep creating a habit of Him, including Him as you write down your goals and get instructions from Him, including Him. He went on to say to them, instead of saying, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do this, he's saying, stop saying that, but here's what you should say. You ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. How many of you ever heard this phrase before? If it's the Lord's will, then I should live. I grew up on that phrase. I can still remember hearing my mama say, if it's the Lord's will, then I shall live. It was like, it just rolled out of her mouth. Whenever she was saying she was going to do anything tomorrow, or whenever she said, if it's the Lord's will, then I shall live, and then I'm going to do X, X, Y, Z. And then even my granddaddy, who I grew up in my teen years, he would say, I can hear his voice now. He would just say, Lord willing, I'm going to do da-da-da-da. Lord willing. And they made that a part of not just their speech, but a part of how they really thought about and put God into everything. It helped them to keep God into their business, helped them to keep God into their family, helped them, keep God into the things where He was involved in their plans. And so James is saying, stop saying you're just going to do this and you don't have any consideration of how you're going to do it and the help you need comes from God. because a lot of the help, you can't do stuff by yourself. Even though you set goals, you can't even have a business by yourself. You need people. You need connections. And you need people who even need your product. You need all of this or your services. You need people. We all need people, and we need to treat people as if we all need each other. And so what James is saying is, this attitude, the attitude that he's saying you should have when you say the Lord's will, if it's the Lord's will, he's not saying don't have any plans. He's not saying stop writing down your goals, but he's saying the proper attitude is when you make plans, you don't even realize how little control you have. You have some control, but you don't even realize how little control you have to make this come to pass. In other words, you need to depend on the will of God and ask God to get involved and pray so God can make connections for you and so you can see. And a lot of times what the prayer does, sometimes the prayer doesn't set up somebody else. The prayer actually sets your mindset so that you have the expectation. Many times I've prayed for things and it's right in my face. And if I wasn't praying about it and had it in my mind, I wouldn't have even recognized that the answer was right there. And that's part of what God does when he does it. We need to recognize our limitations and look at how sovereign God is in all of this so that we can actually move forward, even with our plans and our goals, move forward, inviting the God that has all power to be a part of our plans and a part of our goals. Because what this also does is it gives us insight. This strategy that we're talking about will give us insight and opportunity to ensure that God, a number of things. Ensure that what you're doing is godly. Ensuring that, the plans that you have are godly. The goals that you have are godly. When you look at this, it's like, what's my ultimate goal? What's the outcome? You've seen businesses that do business and all they want is the dollar, no matter who they hurt getting it. Even if they make you think because they hired you, they're paying you, so that's your benefit. But then you don't realize what they're doing to your city. You don't realize what it's doing to your community, and then they don't care. Then they just pick up and leave. We've seen it all. And James is addressing some of this kind of stuff where, the real goal here that James is talking about when he says, get the insight from God, and this is the opportunity for you to do the right thing. Make sure you have godly guidelines and godly goals. The bottom line here with all of this is that learn to love God and love people. And then when you respond like that, you do the right thing in the community. If you're a business, you do your strategy will work for, now you're involving God, and your strategy has a mindset where you're putting things back into the community and not just taking things out. And so let's go to the next verse here. James said, as it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. And this is, he just cut right through the chase. He's saying, if you don't include God in your plans, if you're not saying if it's the Lord's will, if you're not considering God's will in your plans, you're very arrogant to think that you can just do this all by yourself. What you're really doing, this is the dangerous part, is we make God irrelevant. And we don't realize it when that generation that I was talking about, that's, 14 years old, the oldest people are 14 today, when they watch us as we respond, it's almost like they think we just do what we want to do. We don't invite God. There's no other power that we look to, and we need to give them the proper perspective that God is sovereign, that we live in a universe where when we actually engage and allow God to be a part of what we're doing, then we can expect God to move on our behalf. He's saying here, you boast in your arrogant schemes, and all such boasting is evil. These people had shut God out of their business. They still had him in their family. They still had God in their church. But in their business, they were like, this is business. This ain't got nothing to do with God. And James is saying, oh, yes, it does. You need to say, if it's the Lord's will, and not just say it, but do the things that make sure it is God's will, so that it doesn't look like this, where God is on the outside looking in. Because no part of your life, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your business, whether it's your social life, no part of your life should be so confident and arrogant that you don't need God in it. You need God in everything you do. And not just when things go crazy and now you have a crisis and, then you turn around and go, wow, has it come to this? Now we got to pray? You mean we need to pray? When we continuously pray and that becomes our habit, then we're already in the mindset where we can hear what God is saying. James went on to say this, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it's a sin for them. In other words, the whole motive for making money, and this series is not just about making money, but this series is about the path and the journey that you're on and learning to love the journey and not just looking to the end goal. Because you're going to get to a place where it may look like you're not going to make it to the end. But that's just the way it looks right now. And while you're on your journey, we need to recognize that God is with us. He said, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and don't do it, it is a sin to them. If you love God and love people, that's the focus. Loving God and loving people, doing the right thing. Even in business, your whole motive for gathering money should be to do good. I want to do some good in my family, do some good in my community, do some good wherever I am. I want to continuously grow, not just so that I have enough money to make it and just, I'm good, I'm satisfied, I can eat, I had a roof over my head, got a car that should last me the next 6-10 years, and we feel like I don't need to give nothing else. I don't need to produce anything else. We should continue to grow so God can actually use the gifts that you have and make them available to other people who need the exact same thing that's on the inside of you. So here's our challenge for today. And make sure you get a copy of the challenge to take with you so that we can work through this throughout the week. Your challenge is to modify your heart's attitude. That's really what we're focusing on here, about how relevant God is in your everyday life, how relevant God is in your business, how relevant God is. And even though I say business, let's say you don't have a business. How relevant is God in your school life? How relevant is God in your social life with your friends? How relevant is God? Even if you can't believe that there is a God, take yourself off the throne for your own benefit, so that and realize that ultimately I can't control all these things. I can't control the people that I need connections with. I can't control them, but I know who is aware and can actually integrate us together, and that's God. God is the connection between all of us. So you are a steward of certain things, but God is ultimately in charge of everything. So invite God into your goals and your plans to get his will. Invite God into your goals and plans. If you're having a meeting, if you're sitting down, just writing things down, invite God to be a part of that based on your purpose. And you may need to do some things to find out what your purpose is. You can find out what gifts you have, what strengths you have, which kind of points you towards your purpose. But God has a purpose for you. God has a purpose that you were born for. God has a purpose for that. And it's not based on, wow, I need to do this, or I can't do all that to do the purpose. It's based on what's already on the inside of you that even the things that you have a desire for, the things that you like to do. So if you like to do them, what we need to do is the things that we like to do and find easy. Here's a big problem that I see that we have. Let's say you're gifted and you can really, really do some things you can that other people can't do. One person that comes to mind is my son Johannes. That boy is gifted beyond what I think he even realizes he is. And I can remember when he was about 3 or 4 years old. He used to go to church with me when I was a musician. And after church, I had bought him this little Yamaha keyboard that looks like a guitar, but it had keys on it. And actually, it was the real sound. So it didn't, and it cost more than a toy would, but he loved that thing. And he'd go to church, and I'd plug it in, and then we'd jam a little bit together when he was like 4 years old. And one day, somebody broke in our house and stole that. He was not the same afterwards. But I didn't realize how much of a passion he had for that gift. But if I look at him now, I've gone to some of his performances. You should go to some of them. He does a lot of, and he's kind of like me. He's quiet about it. He could be somewhere performing with, the orchestra, and you don't even know about it because he's just doing what he does. And he's just amazing. But he gave me this book to read once, and I think it's called The Outliers. How many of you have read The Outliers? What it does, this book focuses on people who have made major contributions, people who are they're like way outside of the group of people. They're better. In other words, like the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, the people that seem to be so much of a genius. This book's talk about not so much about how much of a genius they are, but what actually contributed and what was up the opportunity for them at the time. Like Bill Gates. One of the things it talks about is he happened to be born at the right time where computers were changing and becoming available, and people, even at that time, he had an opportunity that nobody else had. Whatever, I forget the exact things that made it available, but there were some connections that he had after school where he could go in the library and actually log into a computer and practice. Nobody else had that. And what this book, from the research that this book did, the author of this book did, is they recognized that it takes about 10,000 hours of practice to really become an expert at what you do. And he just looked back at and interviewed some of these people, even the what's that music group? It just that from England, from way back, Beatles. It's like it wasn't that hard. It's like Beatles. He wouldn't be talking about the Beatles, right? Even as he interviewed all of these groups of people, the Beatles, they talk about they had an opportunity. They were playing for this club that required them to play like all night for a Friday night, and they did this, I guess, for a number of years. And when he goes back and count up all these hours, they put in over 10,000 hours, which made them experts at what they do. And so if you put in 10,000 hours, and so anyway, the point I'm making is, Johannes and I went back and looked at, I'm looking at, I said, how many hours do you practice a week? Because I know he practiced anyway. He's like well over 10,000 hours. And you need to think about some of the things that you do. What do you do well? What do you set aside time to do to become an expert at it? Sometimes you have a passion for things, and that's what I was about to say. We have a passion for things, we're good at it, we're gifted for it, but then we don't expand our knowledge in that same area. We go do something else. We think we are the expert instead of expanding our knowledge, and we stop and we're limited based on just the gift instead of continuing to explore. But when you ask God, what's your will for me? He can start to show you all the other things that's available for you and that you actually have the ability to do. What's God's purpose? And you know, God has a purpose for you, but when I say what's God's purpose, it's actually your purpose, but God has a purpose for you. So here's the challenge as we go through it. When you do that, then focus your energy on creating good habits that continuously shape who you are becoming, the person that you're becoming, instead of the activity that you want to end up with in your goals. Start habits that, in other words, you want to start habits that reinforce what you want to be, what you're becoming. I want to practice the things that's making me be what I want to be. And in the case of what I was talking about, Johannes, if you want to be a great musician, then you don't just want to play. You want to be a great musician, then you need to create habits that reinforce that. And it's like a loop. When you create the habit and it becomes, because once something becomes a habit, you don't have to really focus on it. If it's a habit, your mind puts certain things on cruise control and you just do it. And that's the power of having a habit. So here's some ways to implement this, what I call implementation intentions. Implementing God's will should be your heart's attitude. That's really what should be at the forefront of your mind. In my heart, I'm going to implement what God wants me to do. But how do we develop this attitude without it becoming cliche-ish, if that's such a word, cliche-ish? Because it's easy to do what I was saying, like my mom and my granddaddy did. If it's the Lord's will and I shall live, then, it just becomes something you say. But how do we implement this without it just being a cliche? How do we implement it without it just being a religious thing to do? How do we implement this? James said there's something you need to stop doing and there's something you need to start doing. Remember, he said, stop just saying what you're going to do. That's the first thing. Stop just doing it and jumping into it without involving God, and start saying that if it's the Lord's will and I shall live. Even if you don't say that, implement that into your heart's attitude and get things and get God involved into what you're doing. In other words, James says, stop saying I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and start saying, if it's the Lord's will and I shall live, I'll do X, Y, Z. Make that your heart attitude. So here's some ways to do that. One way, and I just want to give you some steps to do that. Consider one goal in any area of your life. Just pick one in any area, whether it's your family, marriage, school, career, your social, friends, finances, your health, whatever it is. Pick one and then start a new habit that reinforces the kind of person you want to be to do that. Not just to reach the goal, but what kind of person do I need to be to reach this goal? So instead of focusing on the accomplishment, focus on your new identity. Ask yourself a few questions. In other words, whatever you're doing, whatever habits you're doing is making you become something. And so create and start your habits on purpose. For example, just say you pick the area of health and you say, I've been way out of control. I need to lose 30 pounds. And that's a lot, right? So I say I'm going to give myself 6 months. I need to lose 30 pounds. And instead of focusing on the scales every day and just sticking to a diet, here's some steps that you need to do. So start by writing down the desired results. In other words, this is the starting point, not your focus. And as I said, say you want to lose 30 pounds. So write that down. I want to lose 30 pounds. At a certain date, I want to be at, 30 pounds lighter than what I am now. When you write this down, you're starting a point, and let's say it's the next 6 months, and what is this? This is September. Let's just say that by Easter next year, I want to be at my desired weight. And you write that down. This is going to be my desired weight. So here's some steps that you can do to do that. First question you need to ask yourself is, who do I want to be? And what type of person could get these results? What person do I have to become to lose 30 pounds? What kind of person do I have to be? You probably got to be health-minded. You probably got, you got to start thinking some things that's different. I need to be health conscious. I need to be a person that's committed to being healthy. When I have other choices, I need to make the right choice. I need to be that kind of person. How can I make those kind of choices? I need to be the kind of person who's engaged in healthy activities. I need to do some things when they're available. I need to be that kind of person. I need to learn how to manage stress if I'm going to be healthy. Because sometimes a lot of people eat just because of stress. And so I need to learn how to manage stress. And that's why you get to this next question. The next question is, what is God's will in my becoming this type of person? Find scriptures on that kind of person, concerning stress, concerning your health. As I said earlier, you should be continuously updating the kind of person that you are as you actually evolve into the next person that you are. We're evolving every single day. And what happens when you bring God into this and you ask God about your purpose, God's purpose gives you direction. That way you end up on the right path. Because if you're on the wrong path because you didn't have the right good directions, then you could still get to your point, but you may be going it may take you longer, and you may not get there, depending on your updating who you are to get there. And so God's purpose give whatever you're doing meaning. That's so important. Because sometimes you'll do some things just like, this ain't doing nothing. I don't get nothing out of this. But God's purpose gives you meaning. And then here's the last thing here. In each step that you take small steps, but do something to reinforce whatever this new identity is with the heart attitude of saying, Lord, I believe this is your will for me. I believe this is your will for me. If God reveals something new, then you just update who that person is. And move forward in what he's given you to do. In other words, you need to edit it. You need to change some things. Whatever it is, just change it. And so the last part of this is, as you do this, I don't want you to do this like just by yourself. As you do this, remember last week when we talked about at the very end, implementation guide. As you implement your plan this week, then I want you to call somebody or text somebody or message somebody, however you do it, or visit somebody, at least one person, and share your plan with them so that you are actually expressing what you are believing that God wants you to do. So that as we move forward in this series, you can focus on who you are becoming instead of just the goal that you set, even though you still need to set goals, but who you are becoming as you reinforce this new person with different habits. That's really what transformation is all about. That's change. You're not just changing to be changed. You're being changed into the image of Christ, and that's our goal. So I want to pray for you here and invite you to make some decisions. So bow your head if you would. Father, I just thank you for this message today. I thank you for this series that we're beginning today. And I pray, Father, that you would touch hearts, mindsets, people, families, individuals in every different group, every generation alpha, every generation, God, the millennials, Generation X, the baby boomers, each generation, Father, that you would move and help us to make decisions with you invited into that process so that you can help us to take steps that move us and transform us into the image of who you already designed us to be. And you've already decided who we need to be, that we can solve the issues in the earth that you put us in the earth to solve. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. I want to give you an opportunity. If you're here today and you just like to know more about what GTM is about, more about God, any of those questions. If you just want to know more about anything, you can scan this code with your phone, and a form will come up, and you can just let us know whether you want to know more about Jesus, if you want to connect with us, if you just want prayer, whatever it is, you can let us know, and we will respond to you and make sure that we get you and help you, get you the help that you desire at whatever pace you want to go and do that. Amen? So God bless you, and thank you, and have a wonderful day.